So my fiance wanted a break to explore her ex, and I gave her exactly what she asked for, a permanent one. When Tessa dropped this bomb, I didn't beg, I didn't cry, I didn't even argue. Instead, I did something so calculated it would make a chess grandmaster proud. Look, I know what you're thinking, another relationship drama story, but stick with me because this one has a twist involving a single party game that spun my entire life into chaos. Stay tuned to see how I handled this mess with some seriously petty style that will make you question everything you thought you knew about handling breakups. But first, let me tell you how I got here. The perfect relationship that wasn't so perfect. For years with someone makes you think you know them inside and out. That's exactly where I was with Tessa, completely convinced we had cracked the code on relationships while ignoring every warning sign that screamed otherwise. We met at some friend's birthday party, one of those cramped apartment gatherings where everyone's talking too loud and pretending the cheap wine tastes expensive. Tessa had this sharp wit that cut through all the party small talk, making jokes about the host's questionable music choices and the fact that someone brought a veggie tray to a party full of 20-somethings. I was hooked immediately, which should have been my first red flag, because desperation disguised as instant connection never ends well. We moved in together after a year because that's what you do when you think you've found your soulmate, and splitting rent sounds financially responsible. Suddenly, we were handling chores like roommates who actually liked each other, dividing up responsibilities without the usual passive-aggressive sticky notes. We told ourselves we were compatible because we both worked in tech-adjacent fields and kept similar schedules, as if professional alignment equals relationship success. Looking back, I realized love makes you stupid in ways that would embarrass a teenager. Tessa's brutal honesty, which I initially found refreshing, was actually just her being mean to people she didn't like. Her confidence, which seemed so attractive, was really just her inability to consider that she might be wrong about anything. But when you're wearing those rose-colored glasses, red flags just look like quirky personality traits that make your partner unique. Our relationship was like driving a rental car that looked reliable in the lot, handled well on short trips, and seemed perfect for the long haul until the engine started sputtering right when you needed it most. Everything felt solid and dependable, right up until it wasn't. When I finally proposed, I kept it simple because grand gestures seemed unnecessary for something that felt so inevitable. Just dinner at home, her favorite takeout, and a ring I'd been hiding in my sock drawer for 3 months. She cried, said yes, and immediately started talking about fall weddings and small guest lists. That night, lying in bed, we mapped out our future like we were following a GPS to happiness. House by the lake, kids in a few years, maybe a dog, definitely a 2-car garage. Everything seemed to be falling into place with the precision of a well-orchestrated plan. We were adults making adult decisions, checking off life milestones like items on a grocery list. Get serious relationship, check. Move in together, check. Get engaged, check. The next boxes were practically filling themselves in, and I felt smug about how smoothly everything was progressing compared to our friends' messy dating lives. But here's the problem with feeling too confident about your relationship. It's usually right before everything goes sideways. The engagement should have been our victory lap, the moment when we could finally relax and enjoy being the couple that had figured it all out. Instead, it became the beginning of the end, though I was too busy planning our future to notice our present was crumbling. The truth is, you can live with someone for years and still be strangers. You can share a bed, a lease, and a Netflix account while having completely different ideas about loyalty, commitment, and what it means to be in a relationship. You can plan a wedding while one of you is already planning an exit strategy. You can think you're building a life together while your partner is keeping their options open. Looking back now, I can see how naive I was to think that 4 years of shared routines and compatible schedules meant we were actually compatible as people. I mistook familiarity for intimacy, routine for stability, and planning for commitment. I thought knowing someone's coffee order and TV preferences meant I knew their heart and character. I was wrong about everything, but especially wrong about thinking that time spent together automatically equals time well spent. Hindsight has this cruel way of making everything obvious after the fact. All those little moments that felt like evidence of our solid foundation were actually cracks in the structure that I chose to ignore. Every compromise that seemed reasonable was actually me giving up pieces of what I wanted. Every time I told myself everything was fine, I was really just afraid to ask the hard questions that might have uncomfortable answers. The thing is, I thought I had done my research. I thought 4 years was enough time to really know someone, to see how they handle stress, disappointment, and commitment. I thought moving in together and getting engaged meant we were on the same page about our future. But it turns out that some people are really good at playing the long game, at keeping their true colors hidden until the moment when showing them becomes unavoidable. Red flags disguised as wedding jitters. Wedding planning reveals people's true colors faster than any personality test ever could. One day you're scrolling through venue photos together. The next day you're questioning whether you actually know the person sitting next to you on the couch. That's exactly what started happening with Tessa. Though at the time I convinced myself it was just normal pre-wedding stress because that's what desperate people do when they don't want to face reality. The Pinterest board abandonment should have been my first clue that something was seriously wrong. For weeks after the engagement, Tessa was obsessed with wedding planning like it was her full-time job. She'd show me color schemes at breakfast, text me flower arrangement ideas during my lunch break, and spend entire evenings researching photographers who specialized in that dreamy, soft-focused style that makes everyone look like they're floating through a romantic movie. Her Pinterest board grew to epic proportions, filled with everything from centerpiece ideas to cake designs that looked like they belonged in a museum rather than at a wedding reception. Then suddenly, radio silence. The Pinterest notifications stopped. The excited planning conversations dried up. When I'd ask about wedding details, she'd give me this blank stare like I was asking her to solve advanced calculus problems. The woman who once spent 3 hours debating whether our napkin should be sage green or eucalyptus couldn't be bothered to have an opinion about anything wedding related anymore. It was like watching someone lose interest in their favorite hobby overnight. Wedding planning stress became the universal excuse for everything weird happening in our relationship. Tessa seemed distracted during conversations. Wedding stress. She was spending more time on her phone than talking to me. Wedding stress. She forgot we had dinner plans with my parents. Wedding stress. I bought into this explanation because it was easier than admitting that maybe the person I was planning to marry was checking out of our relationship while I was busy picking out tablecloths and arguing with caterers about dietary restrictions. Love makes you rationalize behavior that would seem insane in any other context. When your friend's partner starts acting weird, you immediately tell them to investigate. When your own partner starts acting weird, you become a detective for excuses instead of red flags. I convinced myself that Tessa's sudden disinterest in wedding planning was actually a sign of her maturity, that she was above getting caught up in all the superficial details because she cared more about our relationship than the party celebrating it. Looking back, that logic was more twisted than a pretzel factory. Every wedding decision became a masterclass in procrastination. Bridesmaids? She needed more time to think about which friends deserved the honor. Wedding dress? The appointments could wait because she wanted to lose 5 pounds first. Venue booking? We had plenty of time to visit locations, even though the good ones were booking up faster than concert tickets. Her favorite phrase became, "There's still time," which she deployed whenever I brought up anything wedding related. This phrase became the relationship equivalent of "the check is in the mail," or "I'll start my diet on Monday." The most telling incident happened when she canceled our cake tasting appointment. We booked it weeks in advance, and I'd actually taken time off work because she said it was important to her that we do this together. The morning of the appointment, she texted me saying she had a client emergency and couldn't make it. When I suggested rescheduling, she said we could just pick something simple later. The woman who once spent 45 minutes explaining why buttercream was superior to fondant suddenly didn't care what our wedding cake tasted like. Small red flags started accumulating like items in an online shopping cart that you never actually purchase. Individually, each one seemed manageable, explainable, forgivable. Together, they formed a pattern that spelled out a message I didn't want to read. Little did I know these postponed flower choices and canceled cake tastings would be the warm-up act for a much bigger reveal. The most telling sign was how she talked about the wedding when other people brought it up. At parties or family dinners, when someone asked about our plans, Tessa would give these vague, non-committal answers that made it sound like we were maybe thinking about possibly getting married someday rather than actually planning a specific event. She'd deflect questions about dates and details with jokes about how stressful wedding planning was, how crazy the industry was, how much easier it would be to just elope and skip all the fuss. Meanwhile, I was becoming the sole wedding planner by default, making decisions about flowers and food and music for an event that was supposed to represent both of us, but felt increasingly like my solo project. I was the one calling vendors, comparing prices and trying to coordinate schedules, while Tessa floated through the process like a disinterested observer rather than an active participant. It was exhausting trying to plan a celebration of our love with someone who seemed to have lost interest in celebrating anything about us. The truth that I refused to acknowledge was staring me in the face every time I looked at our wedding planning timeline. You don't avoid planning the happiest day of your life unless you're not sure it's going to be happy. You don't procrastinate on decisions about your future unless you're not sure about that future. Wedding planning doesn't create relationship problems. It just forces you to confront the ones that already exist. All those delays and excuses weren't about stress or perfectionism or being overwhelmed by choices. They were about someone who wasn't sure she wanted to marry me, but didn't know how to say it. What I didn't realize was that all of this wedding planning drama was just setting the stage for something much more revealing. Sometimes the universe has a twisted sense of humor about timing, and it was about to serve up the perfect moment for all those buried doubts to come crashing into the open. The TikTok game that broke the camel's back. Nothing says fun like a room full of adults voluntarily interrogating each other about exes. We were at Jake and Maria's apartment, one of those gatherings that starts with dinner and devolves into everyone sitting around their living room with drinks, complaining about work, and pretending we're still young enough to stay up past midnight on weekends. The usual suspects were there, including Sarah, who'd introduced me to Tessa years earlier and was probably already mentally composing her maid of honor speech. Everyone was in good spirits, sharing stories and laughing at Jake's terrible jokes, when Maria pulled out her phone with that mischievous grin that should have been an immediate warning sign. Social media has given us endless ways to sabotage our own relationships, and TikTok games rank right up there with drunk texting and Instagram stalking in terms of pure destructive potential. This particular game was one of those deceptively simple concepts where you answer personal questions while trying to keep a straight face, and everyone else gets to judge whether you're being honest or just trying to avoid revealing embarrassing truths. It's basically designed to make people confess things they don't want to keep private, which explains why it's so popular and so dangerous. The questions started harmless enough. Favorite movie, biggest pet peeve, most embarrassing childhood memory. The kind of stuff that makes for good conversation without causing relationship casualties. Everyone was laughing, sharing stories, and I was actually enjoying myself despite my usual skepticism about these kinds of social experiments. Tessa seemed relaxed too, more engaged than she'd been in weeks, which should have been another red flag, but felt like a positive sign at the time. Then came the question that changed everything. Someone read it off their phone with a casual tone that didn't match the emotional bomb they were about to drop into our evening. Which ex would you date again? The room went quiet for a second. That particular silence that happens when everyone suddenly realizes they're about to hear things they might not want to know. Most people gave diplomatic answers, or made jokes to deflect the question entirely. Sarah talked about her college boyfriend who was sweet but immature. Jake mentioned his high school girlfriend who moved away for college. Safe, distant choices that didn't threaten anyone's current relationships. Then it was Tessa's turn, and she didn't hesitate for even a second before saying Dylan's name like she'd been waiting for someone to ask her about him. Our friend's living room went from frat party vibe to crime scene quiet in half a beat. The audacity of mentioning your ex's name in front of your fiancé during a party game designed to reveal hidden truths was breathtaking in its boldness. Not only did she say his name, but she said it with this little smile that suggested she'd been thinking about him recently, maybe more recently than any engaged person should be thinking about their ex. Dylan, apparently, was the one who got away, though from the way Tessa described him, he sounded more like the one who should have stayed away. According to her impromptu biography, he was spontaneous where I was predictable, adventurous where I was practical, and passionate where I was steady. She painted this picture of their relationship like it was some epic romance novel that ended too soon, rather than acknowledging that maybe it ended for good reasons that had nothing to do with bad timing. The backtracking started immediately when she noticed the Arctic silence that had descended on the room. She tried to laugh it off, saying it was just a hypothetical question and didn't mean anything, that she was just being honest about her past like the game required. But honest about what exactly? That she'd been fantasizing about her ex while planning our wedding? That she thought our relationship lacked the excitement she'd had with someone else? That she was settling for stability when what she really wanted was drama? Our friends tried to move the conversation along, but the damage was done. The rest of the evening felt like everyone was walking on eggshells, afraid to say anything that might trigger another uncomfortable revelation. Tessa kept glancing at me with this guilty expression that confirmed my suspicions that her Dylan answer wasn't just a random thought, but something she'd been considering seriously. The drive home was a masterclass in passive-aggressive silence. She knew she'd stepped in it, I knew she'd stepped in it, but neither of us wanted to start the conversation that would inevitably lead to bigger questions about our relationship. Instead, we both stared out the windshield, listening to the radio and pretending that everything was normal while the elephant in the car grew larger with every mile. Night, lying in bed next to someone who just publicly fantasized about her ex, I started connecting dots that I'd been ignoring for months. The wedding planning avoidance, the increased phone usage, the general sense that she was mentally somewhere else even when she was physically present. Dylan wasn't just a random answer to a party game question. Dylan was the reason our relationship felt like it was running on autopilot. Sometimes party games reveal more about people than years of therapy sessions ever could. They strip away the polite filters we use in daily conversation and force us to confront truths we'd rather keep buried. That night, a simple tic-tac game did what months of wedding planning stress and relationship uncertainty couldn't do. It gave me the first concrete evidence that the woman I was planning to marry was already planning her escape route. What I didn't realize was that this public confession was just the tip of the iceberg. The real detective work was about to begin, and it would involve paying attention to something I'd been unconsciously ignoring for weeks. When your fiancé becomes a phone zombie, phone behavior changes reveal more about relationship problems than a private investigator with unlimited resources. One day, your partner treats their device like a boring necessity. The next day, they're clutching it like it contains state secrets. That's exactly what started happening with Tessa after the Dylan revelation at the party, though I initially convinced myself that everyone's phone usage had increased lately because technology addiction was just part of modern life. The secretive texting smiles were the first dead giveaway that something had shifted in our relationship dynamic. Tessa would be sitting across from me at dinner, scrolling through her phone with this little grin that she definitely wasn't getting from work emails or grocery store coupons. These weren't the casual smiles you get from funny memes or cute animal videos. These were the kind of private, knowing smiles that people get when they're flirting with someone who isn't their fiancé. According to what I later discovered, her secret smiles weren't about work emails. They were about texting Dylan. She'd catch me looking and immediately straighten her face, like she'd been caught stealing cookies from the jar. I turned into a digital detective without meaning to, analyzing every phone-related behavior like I was studying for a PhD in suspicious partner patterns. The way she angled her screen away from me when notifications came in, the speed at which she'd flip her phone face down when I walked into the room, the sudden interest in taking her phone to the bathroom, which had never been part of her routine before. I started noticing things that would make a security expert proud and a therapist concerned about my mental health. Her phone behavior became more secretive than a teenager hiding their report card after. Failing 3 classes, she developed this new habit of keeping her device constantly on silent, claiming the notifications were distracting her from work, which might have been believable if her work hadn't always involved constant client communication that required immediate responses. She'd disappear into the bedroom to take calls that were supposedly about graphic design projects, but somehow required hushed tones and closed doors. The excuses started flowing like water from a broken faucet, each one more creative than the last. Work became her universal explanation for everything weird happening with her phone usage. Late-night texting, client in a different time zone, secretive calls, confidential project discussions, smiling at her screen during dinner, funny work set with colleagues. The word work became so overused in our conversations that it lost all meaning, like when you say a word too many times and it starts sounding fake. Our date nights began getting canceled with the reliability of a broken alarm clock. Family obligations suddenly multiplied like rabbits in springtime. Her sister needed help with moving, again. Her mom required emergency shopping assistance. Her cousin was having relationship drama that apparently only Tessa could solve through hours of phone conversations. These family emergencies always seemed to coincide with times we planned to spend together, which was either the worst luck in the history of family scheduling or a convenient way to avoid quality time with her fiancé. I rationalized every obvious lie because facing the truth felt scarier than living in denial. When someone you love starts acting suspicious, your brain becomes an expert at creating innocent explanations for guilty behavior. Maybe she really was dealing with difficult clients who required extra attention. Maybe her family really had entered the most crisis-heavy period in their collective history. Maybe the increased phone usage was just coincidence and I was being paranoid and controlling for noticing patterns that any reasonable person would find concerning. The hierarchy of priorities in our relationship shifted so gradually that I didn't notice until I was firmly planted at the bottom of the list. Phone calls took precedence over conversations with me. Text messages became more important than plans we made together. Whatever was happening on our screen consistently trumped whatever was happening in our living room. I went from being her primary source of entertainment and emotional connection to being background noise in her increasingly digital life. Normal couple behavior involves some level of phone sharing and transparency that we'd completely lost. We used to show each other funny videos, share interesting articles, and occasionally use each other's phones when ours were charging or missing. That casual phone sharing disappeared entirely, replaced by protective behaviors that made her device seem more valuable than our relationship. She'd rather let her phone die than ask to use mine, which was particularly weird since we'd been sharing chargers and devices for years. The contrast between her old phone habits and new phone habits was stark enough to be visible from space. Previously, she'd leave her phone anywhere, forget to charge it, and sometimes go hours without checking messages. The new version of Tessa was never more than arm's length from her device, checking it constantly and responding to notifications with the urgency of an emergency room doctor. She went from casual phone user to someone whose emotional state seemed directly connected to whatever was happening on her screen. Late-night phone usage became her new hobby, with mysterious text conversations that apparently couldn't wait until morning. I'd wake up to the soft glow of her screen, illuminating our bedroom at 2 a.m, watching her type messages with the focus of someone writing the great American novel. When I asked about it, she'd claim insomnia and say she was just scrolling through social media to fall back asleep, which would have been more believable if social media typically required that much typing. The pattern became undeniable once I stepped back and looked at the bigger picture. When someone starts treating their phone like Fort Knox while simultaneously losing interest in spending quality time with their partner, they're usually hiding something bigger than work emails and family drama. The device that used to connect us to each other had become the tool she was using to connect with someone else. But that was just the warm-up for the biggest bombshell yet. Quite like walking into your own home and immediately sensing that you're about to get hit with news that will change everything. You know that feeling when the air feels different, like the atmospheric pressure dropped right before a tornado hits, and everyone around you is acting just weird enough to make your survival instincts kick in. That's exactly what happened on what started as a completely normal Tuesday evening in our apartment, though normal was about to become a distant memory. The worst relationship conversations always happen at the most inconvenient times, usually when you're doing something completely mundane like unloading the dishwasher or trying to figure out what to make for dinner. Life-changing announcements typically arrive while you're holding a spatula and wondering if the leftover pasta is still good, which is exactly where I found myself when Tessa decided to drop her relationship bomb. I walked into our kitchen after a long day at work, looking forward to the simple pleasure of making dinner together and complaining about our respective bosses like we did most evenings. At the moment I stepped through the door, I could tell something was off. The atmosphere felt thick enough to cut with the knife I was about to use for chopping vegetables. Tessa was standing by the counter with this expression that screamed serious conversation, even though she hadn't said a word yet. Standing in my own kitchen suddenly felt like being a guest in someone else's house, like I'd accidentally wandered into the wrong apartment and didn't belong there. The familiar space where we'd share thousands of meals and conversations felt foreign and uncomfortable. Even the lighting seemed different, casting shadows in corners I'd never noticed before. It's amazing how quickly a place can stop feeling like home when the person you share it with starts acting like a stranger. I was at the stove, stirring something that would probably end up being dinner if this conversation didn't kill my appetite first when she finally spoke. "I need to talk to you about something," she said with that particular tone that ranks right up there with "it's not you, it's me" in the Relationship Death Sentence Hall of Fame. That night, my spatula became my personal damage control prop, something to grip while my world prepared to tilt sideways. The uncomfortable silence stretched between us like a chasm that kept growing wider with each passing second. I could hear our neighbor's television through the thin walls, some sitcom laugh track providing an absurdly cheerful soundtrack to whatever disaster was about to unfold in our kitchen. The refrigerator hummed its usual tune, completely oblivious to the fact that our relationship was about to implode. Tessa kept fidgeting with her phone, which had become her security blanket over the past few weeks, and I noticed she was avoiding eye contact in that particular way that means that someone is about to say something they know will hurt you. She cleared her throat several times like she was preparing to give a speech, which made the whole scene feel even more surreal. This was my partner of 4 years, someone I'd planned to marry, and she was treating me like an audience she needed to convince, rather than the person she supposedly loved most. That sinking feeling in your stomach when you know something terrible is coming is worse than actually hearing the terrible news itself. Your brain starts racing through possibilities, trying to prepare for whatever blow is about to land. But you can never really prepare for the moment your entire future gets rewritten by someone else's decisions. The anticipation creates this awful suspended animation where everything feels urgent and slow at the same time. The weird energy in our shared space was so intense, it felt like the walls were closing in on us. This apartment that had been our sanctuary for years suddenly felt cramped and oppressive. The furniture seemed to loom larger, creating obstacles between us that hadn't existed before. The kitchen island that had been perfect for casual conversations now felt like a barrier separating two people who were about to become strangers to each other. I found myself noticing random details with unusual clarity, like how the evening light was hitting the countertop and how Tessa's coffee mug from that morning was still sitting in the sink unwashed. These mundane observations felt important somehow, like my brain was trying to memorize the last moments of our normal life before everything changed forever. It's strange how your mind works when it senses disaster approaching, cataloging ordinary details that will later serve as markers of before and after. The tension became so thick that even breathing felt difficult, like the air had turned into something heavy and unforgiving. We were both clearly avoiding whatever conversation needed to happen, but the delay was making everything worse. I could see in her expression that she'd already made some kind of decision that would affect both of us, and I was just waiting to find out what verdict had been reached about our relationship without my input. Sometimes home stops feeling like home long before you understand why the foundation has shifted beneath your feet, and that night our apartment transformed from a safe haven into the setting for a conversation that would redefine everything I thought I knew about the person standing across from me. What came next would test every assumption I'd made about reasonable requests and basic human decency. The break request that broke everything. When Tessa finally spoke, her words hit like a freight train carrying a cargo of pure audacity. She wanted a break to explore things with Dylan, but not a real break, more like a relationship pause button that I could press whenever she finished shopping around and decided what she actually wanted. The mental gymnastics required to think this was reasonable would have impressed Olympic judges. She needed space to figure out her feelings about Dylan before committing to marriage with me, because apparently 4 years together hadn't been enough time to determine whether I was the right person for her. Imagine your partner asking permission to cheat. It was that wild. Her delivery was so polished, it was obvious she'd been practicing this speech for days, probably in front of the bathroom mirror like she was auditioning for a daytime soap opera. She had all her talking points ready, complete with emotional pauses and carefully chosen words designed to make her betrayal sound like personal growth. The way she emphasized needing to be completely honest with herself and with me made it sound like she was doing us both a favor by requesting permission to cheat with extra steps. Being someone's backup plan is about as flattering as being compared to a spare tire. Sure, spare tires are useful when you're stuck on the side of the road, but nobody gets excited about using one. Nobody brags about their spare tire or shows it off to their friends. It's just there, waiting patiently in the trunk, ready to serve its purpose when the preferred option fails. That's exactly what Tessa was asking me to be, her relationship spare tire, available whenever Dylan inevitably disappointed her again. The logic behind needing to date other people to appreciate what you have is like saying you need to eat garbage to appreciate good food. If you don't already know the value of what's on your plate, maybe the problem isn't your palate, maybe the problem is you're not hungry for what you're being served. Tessa claimed she needed this comparison to be sure about our relationship, as if 4 years of daily life together hadn't provided enough data points for evaluation. The conversation devolved into absurd territory when she started explaining how this break would actually strengthen our relationship in the long run. Taking time apart to explore other connections would help her return to me with complete certainty about our future together. She was essentially asking me to wait while she conducted a scientific experiment to determine whether the grass was greener on Dylan's side of the fence, with the promise that she'd probably come back once she finished her research. Her favorite phrase during this disaster of a conversation was, "It's not like that," which she deployed whenever I pointed out that what she was describing sounded exactly like cheating with a permission slip. It's not like she wanted to sleep with Dylan, she just wanted to spend time with him without me around to see what developed naturally. It's not like she was choosing him over me. She just needed to make sure she wasn't missing out on something better before settling down. Every "it's not like that" made it clear that it was exactly like that. The entitlement required to ask someone to wait while you shop around for better options takes a special kind of confidence that borders on delusion. She wasn't just asking me to pause our relationship, she was asking me to suspend my entire life while she figured out whether I was good enough to marry. The assumption that I would sit quietly on the bench while she played the field showed a breathtaking lack of respect for my feelings, my time, and my dignity as a human being. What made the whole situation even more surreal was how she presented it as a temporary arrangement, like she was asking to borrow my car for the weekend rather than requesting permission to emotionally destroy our relationship. She had timelines and conditions, suggesting we could revisit our engagement in a few months after she'd had adequate time to explore her Dylan situation. The casualness with which she discussed dismantling our future was almost as insulting as the request itself. She tried to frame the whole thing as being fair to both of us, claiming she didn't want to enter marriage with any regrets or unresolved feelings. But fairness would have involved having these Dylan feelings before accepting my proposal, not after planning our wedding and letting me believe we were building a future together. Fair would have been breaking up with me cleanly rather than asking me to participate in my own romantic humiliation. The conversation continued with her, explaining how this arrangement would benefit me too, giving me time to think about whether I really wanted to marry someone who needed to date other people to be sure about our relationship. She presented my inevitable hurt and anger as evidence that maybe I wasn't as committed as I claimed to be, turning my natural reaction to betrayal into proof that her plan was necessary for both of us. By the end of her presentation, the answer to her request had become crystal clear without me needing to say much of anything. Some relationship proposals are so outrageous they respond to themselves, revealing exactly what kind of person would make such demands and exactly what they think of their partner. When someone asks you to be their backup plan while they pursue someone else, they've already told you everything you need to know about where you stand in their priorities. What happened next probably wasn't what she expected from someone who'd just been asked to wait on the sidelines while their fiancé explored other options. The chess master's response. My response was so calm it could have been prescribed as a sedative. Tessa had clearly prepared for a massive fight, probably rehearsing her defensive arguments and emotional manipulation tactics for days. She was ready for tears, accusations, and dramatic declarations about our relationship. What she got instead was me nodding thoughtfully, like she'd just asked my opinion about changing our internet provider. The confusion on her face was absolutely priceless. Chess grandmaster style, because petty relationship wars deserve an equal parts strategic exit. Every instinct in my body wanted to scream about the insanity of her request, to point out the obvious flaws in her logic, to demand answers about when exactly she'd lost her mind. Instead, I channeled my inner chess player and focused on the bigger picture. She wanted to play games with our relationship, so I decided to play games too, just not the ones she expected. Not reacting dramatically forces the other person to confront the actual content of what they're saying rather than getting distracted by your emotional response. When someone drops a relationship bomb and you don't explode, they're left sitting there with their own words hanging in the air, sounding exactly as ridiculous as they actually are. Tessa kept waiting for me to interrupt her with outrage, but my silence made every sentence she spoke sound worse than the last. The poker face I maintained during her presentation was a masterpiece of strategic self-control. I treated her request like a business proposal that needed careful consideration rather than an emotional betrayal that demanded immediate reaction. This approach completely threw off her game plan because she'd clearly expected our conversation to devolve into a shouting match where she could paint me as the unreasonable one for not understanding her need for exploration and self-discovery. Here's where the research gets interesting. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I simply agreed. Agreeing to unreasonable requests can be the ultimate power move because it gives people exactly what they think they want while forcing them to face the consequences of their choices. When someone asks for something outrageous, they're usually expecting resistance that allows them to negotiate down to something slightly less outrageous. By accepting her proposal without argument, I eliminated her ability to moderate her position or claim I was being inflexible. The master plan brewing behind my calm exterior was beautiful in its simplicity. She wanted a break to explore her options, so I would give her all the exploration time in the world. She wanted space to figure out her feelings, so I would provide her with more space than she ever imagined possible. She wanted freedom from our relationship constraints, so I would free her completely and permanently from any obligation to consider my feelings about anything ever again. Giving people exactly what they ask for and watching them panic is one of life's most satisfying experiences. Tessa wanted the freedom to date Dylan without technically cheating, so I agreed she should have that freedom. She wanted time to figure out her feelings without pressure from me, so I suggested she take all the time she needed. She wanted to explore what might have been with her ex, so I encouraged her to explore thoroughly and completely. The conversation became increasingly surreal as I continued agreeing with her points while she grew more uncomfortable with my responses. When she mentioned needing space, I suggested she might need more space than she initially thought. When she talked about taking time to figure things out, I recommended taking whatever time necessary to be completely certain about her decision. My enthusiasm for her plan clearly wasn't what she expected. She kept trying to reassure me that this break wouldn't necessarily mean the end of our relationship, that we could revisit our engagement after she'd resolved her Dylan situation. I nodded along supportively, telling her that sounded like a reasonable approach, while internally calculating how quickly I could eliminate every trace of our shared life before she had time to change her mind about anything. My calm acceptance also prevented her from using my emotional reaction as justification for her behavior. She couldn't claim I was controlling or unsupportive when I was literally encouraging her to follow her heart wherever it led. She couldn't paint me as the bad guy for not respecting her needs when I was actively helping her meet those needs in the most thorough way possible. The mini payoff of this strategic approach became clear as the conversation wound down. Tessa had gotten everything she asked for without any of the resistance she prepared to overcome. She looked genuinely unsettled by how smoothly everything had gone, like someone who prepared for war and found themselves in an empty battlefield. Sometimes the best response to manipulation is complete cooperation, especially when you're already 3 steps ahead of the game. What Tessa didn't realize during her carefully planned relationship exit speech was that she'd made one crucial assumption that was about to make her strategic maneuvering look absolutely ridiculous. Operation House Sale and Disappearing Act. The house we'd been living in for 2 years, the one she decorated with her Pinterest boards and filled with her graphic design equipment, was entirely in my name. Turns out the deed was all me. Oops, for Tessa. Not joint ownership, not a rental agreement with both our signatures, just my name on the mortgage and every legal document that mattered. Her assumption she had some claim to our shared domestic paradise was about to become the most expensive mistake of her dating career. Real estate revenge is a dish best served immediately, and I wasted no time getting that house listed for sale. The morning after our kitchen conversation, while Tessa was probably texting Dylan about her newfound freedom, I was on the phone with a realtor who specialized in quick sales. She had the listing live by noon with professional photos that made our place look like a magazine spread. The housing market was hot, and properties in our neighborhood were moving faster than concert tickets. Life can change direction with startling speed when you finally stop being a passive participant in your own story. One day, you're planning a wedding and debating centerpiece colors. The next day, you're interviewing real estate agents and researching moving companies. The transformation from relationship victim to strategic mastermind happened so quickly it gave me whiplash, but the good kind that comes from finally taking control. Packing up someone else's belongings is like being Marie Kondo for people instead of possessions, deciding what sparks joy and what needs to disappear from your life permanently. Tessa's stuff was scattered throughout our house, like evidence of a relationship that had exploded rather than ended cleanly. Her art supplies claimed half the dining room table. Her clothes had invaded my closet, and her collection of decorative pillows had transformed our couch into something that belonged in a home goods store. Hiring professional movers to handle the delivery was the kind of efficiency that would make a corporate CEO proud. I found a company that specialized in delicate relocations. Then they showed up with boxes, bubble wrap, and careful attention to detail. These guys were so professional, they made packing up a failed relationship look like a high-end moving service commercial. They wrapped Tessa's artwork like it was headed to a gallery, boxed her clothes like designer pieces, and loaded everything with the sort of care that suggested they'd handled plenty of similar situations before. The crew left a simple note with the final delivery. Here's your stuff. Good luck. Professional, efficient, and somehow perfectly summarized the entire situation without any unnecessary drama or explanation. The strategic removal of relationship artifacts from our shared space became a fascinating exercise in domestic archaeology. Every item told a story about our 4 years together, from coffee mugs we bought on weekend trips to throw blankets that had witnessed countless movie nights. I found myself categorizing objects by their emotional significance and practical value, keeping things that served a purpose, and boxing up everything that only served as reminders. Live, laugh, love signs, and decorative throw pillows apparently multiply like rabbits when you're not paying attention to your home's aesthetic evolution. Tessa had gradually transformed our space from a functional bachelor pad into something that looked like it belonged in a lifestyle blog about cozy living. The sheer volume of decorative objects that served no purpose beyond looking cute was staggering, and packing them all revealed just how much of our shared space had been dedicated to her vision of domestic bliss. My dining room became command central for Operation Fresh Start, with boxes labeled by category and destination. Tessa's design equipment went into containers marked for her new address. Her personal items got packed with appropriate care, and our shared purchases got divided with business-like efficiency. I kept the coffee maker because I'd bought it, donated the decorative vases because they'd never made sense anyway, and sold the furniture that felt too coupley for my new single life. The house started looking like a blank canvas instead of a museum of relationship failure, which was exactly the transformation I needed. Empty walls and cleared surfaces created possibilities instead of reminders. The space that had felt cramped and emotionally loaded during our final weeks together suddenly felt open and full of potential. Removing the physical evidence of our shared life made room for imagining what my independent life might look like. Taking control of your environment really does help you take control of your life, especially when that environment has been invaded by someone else's decisions and decorating choices. House felt like mine again, once all traces of our shared domestic experiment had been professionally removed and strategically relocated. Every empty surface and cleared corner represented a fresh start, a clean slate, and the beginning of a life where I got to make all the decisions about throw pillows and wall art. The whole operation took 3 hours and cost less than a fancy dinner, which seemed like a bargain for professional relationship cleanup services. And just like that, her Pinterest empire was boxed up and on its way out. But removing someone's physical presence from your life is only half the battle when it comes to reclaiming your narrative from people who have their own version of events to share. The social media truth bomb. Social media became my weapon of choice for setting the record straight about our relationship's spectacular ending. While Tessa was probably crafting some elaborate explanation about our breakup involving incompatible life goals or mutual growing apart nonsense, I decided to skip the creative writing exercise and go straight to the facts. The strategic social media post I crafted was a masterpiece of professional level honesty disguised as simple announcement. No dramatic language, no emotional manipulation, no vague references to betrayal and heartbreak that would leave people guessing about what actually happened. The post read like a press release about a business restructuring rather than the end of a 4-year relationship, which made it infinitely more devastating than any angry rant could have been. Just a straightforward explanation that Tessa had requested a break to explore things with her ex Dylan, and that I decided to give her all the space she needed by ending our engagement permanently. Simple, factual, and completely undeniable. No need for spin doctors. Sometimes a single tweet-like statement does more damage than 1,000 breakup songs. Truth hits completely different when it's presented without hysteria because people can actually focus on the content instead of getting distracted by emotional theatrics. When someone posts vague inspirational quotes about new beginnings and learning to love themselves, everyone knows something went wrong, but nobody knows what actually happened. When someone posts specific facts about their ex requesting permission to date someone else, there's no room for interpretation or sympathy manipulation. The stark contrast between dramatic relationship posts and factual relationship posts is like the difference between reality TV and documentary filmmaking. Our frame group's reaction to getting the real story, instead of cryptic social media poetry, was immediate and unanimous. Sarah, who introduced us and probably felt partially responsible for the whole mess, called within an hour, asking if the post was some kind of joke. Jake texted to ask if I needed help moving, which was sweet but unnecessary since I'd already handled that part. Maria wanted to know if Tessa had lost her mind completely, which seemed like a reasonable question given the circumstances. The chain reaction of people reaching out with support and disbelief confirmed that my straightforward approach had been the right choice. The truth-telling chain reaction in our social circles spread faster than gossip at a high school reunion. People who'd been wondering why Tessa seemed distant at recent gatherings suddenly had answers that made perfect sense. Friends who'd noticed her increased phone usage and mysterious scheduling conflicts finally understood what had been happening behind the scenes. The missing pieces of our relationship puzzle clicked into place for everyone who'd been watching from the outside, creating a collective understanding that vindicated every instinct people had been too polite to voice. Tessa's panic as her carefully crafted narrative crumbled was visible even through social media, which takes some serious emotional transparency. Her immediate response was to post her own version of events, but damage control is significantly harder when someone has already shared the unvarnished truth. She tried the classic breakup social media strategy of posting inspirational quotes about following your heart and being true to yourself, but those generic relationship platitudes looked ridiculous next to my specific factual account of what had actually happened. Professional consequences started following her personal poor choices with the inevitability of a perfectly timed domino effect. Word spread through our industry network because graphic design and project management circles overlap more than most people realize. Colleagues who'd worked with both of us started asking questions about her reliability and decision-making processes. Potential clients began reconsidering contracts with someone whose personal life suggested questionable judgment about commitments and professional relationships. The freelance world is smaller than people think, and reputation matters more than portfolio quality when clients are choosing who to trust with important projects. The cost of treating people badly extends far beyond the immediate relationship damage, because modern life is interconnected in ways that make privacy nearly impossible. Social media ensures that personal choices have professional consequences. Mutual friends guarantee that stories spread through shared networks, and digital footprints create permanent records of how people handle difficult situations. The old days of quietly ending relationships and moving on without public scrutiny are over, replaced by a system where every major life decision becomes part of your searchable online reputation. My approach of leading with facts and maintaining emotional neutrality proved more effective than any sophisticated spin campaign could have been. The comparison between authentic transparency and manufactured narrative control became obvious as our respective social media strategies played out over the following weeks. My single factual post generated more credible support than all of Tessa's inspirational quote sharing and selective storytelling combined. People respond to honesty with relief because it cuts through the usual relationship drama nonsense that fills social media feeds. Authenticity wins over spin every single time, especially when the facts are already damaging enough without any embellishment. Honesty turned out to be the ultimate revenge because it required absolutely no embellishment or creative interpretation to make Tessa's behavior look problematic. The facts spoke for themselves with devastating clarity, creating a permanent record of exactly what had happened that couldn't be disputed or reframed later. But sometimes, the most unexpected validation comes from the most unlikely sources, and I was about to discover that truth has a way of reaching people you never expected. Dylan's message arrived like a plot twist and nobody saw coming, especially not the woman who'd been orchestrating the whole drama. 2 weeks after my social media truth bomb detonated across our mutual networks, I got a message from the man himself, the infamous ex who'd supposedly been the object of Tessa's romantic curiosity. He wanted to meet for coffee to explain his side of the story and apologize for any role he might have played in destroying my relationship. The audacity was almost admirable, like someone apologizing for being the victim of a kidnapping. What Dylan revealed during our awkward coffee shop encounter was so much worse than anything I'd imagined about Tessa's motivations. According to him, she'd been reaching out sporadically for months, not weeks, testing the waters with casual messages that gradually became more personal and flirtatious. The timeline he described meant she'd been planning her backup strategy since before we'd even booked our wedding venue, conducting relationship reconnaissance while I was busy comparing catering menus and arguing with florists about seasonal flower availability. Premeditated relationship crimes deserve their own category in the betrayal handbook because the level of calculation required to maintain one partnership while systematically developing another takes a special kind of emotional compartmentalization. Tessa hadn't just gotten confused about her feelings during a moment of wedding stress. She'd been conducting a months-long campaign to secure her exit strategy, keeping Dylan warm on the back burner while letting me believe we were building something solid and permanent together. The conversation revealed that cheaters recognize other cheaters with the precision of a twisted superpower. Dylan had enough relationship experience to recognize the signs of someone who was fishing for validation while technically still committed to someone else. He'd seen this pattern before in his own dating history, where people reach out to exes not because they miss them specifically, but because they need confirmation that they still have options available. Tessa's strategy was essentially keeping a spare boyfriend in the relationship pantry, right next to the backup pasta sauce and emergency chocolate stash. She'd been maintaining just enough contact with Dylan to keep him interested while never crossing any lines that would technically qualify as cheating. It was emotional meal planning, making sure she had all the ingredients for a new relationship ready to go whenever she decided to cook up something different from what she had at home. The poetic justice of her backup plan backfiring spectacularly was so perfect it felt like the universe had hired a professional comedy writer. Not only had Dylan rejected her advances and told her to figure out her current relationship before complicating it with past relationships, but he'd also decided to reach out to me directly to clear the air. Her carefully constructed safety net had become a spotlight that exposed her behavior to the exact person she'd been trying to deceive. Dylan's account of their text exchanges painted a picture of someone who'd been methodically testing multiple escape routes while maintaining the appearance of commitment. She'd been asking him about his dating life, sharing complaints about wedding planning stress, and gradually escalating the intimacy of their conversations. The progression he described was like watching someone slowly turn up the temperature in a pot of water, hoping the frog won't notice until it's too late to jump out. The revelation that she'd been planning this for months rather than weeks recontextualized every weird moment from a recent past. Her decreased enthusiasm for wedding planning wasn't about stress. It was about uncertainty regarding whether she'd actually be attending her own wedding. Her increased phone usage wasn't about work projects. It was about maintaining her backup relationship while managing her primary one. Her general distraction and emotional distance made perfect sense once I understood she'd been mentally preparing for a different future. Truth always finds a way to surface, usually in the most embarrassing possible circumstances for the people trying to hide it. Tessa's carefully managed narrative about needing space to explore her feelings fell apart when confronted with Dylan's detailed account of months of strategic relationship maintenance. She'd been caught in her own web of deception by the very person she'd been trying to use as her escape plan. The conversation with Dylan provided the final piece of the puzzle I hadn't even realized I was solving. His timeline of their interactions explained every strange behavior, every unexplained mood change, and every moment when I'd felt like something was off but couldn't identify what. He'd inadvertently become my relationship detective, providing evidence of a crime I hadn't known was being committed against me. Sometimes the people you least expect become your biggest validators in situations where you need confirmation that you're not losing your mind. Dylan's perspective verified that my instincts about the relationship had been correct, that the weird energy I'd been sensing was real, and that my decision to end things immediately had been the right choice. When your ex's ex calls you to say, "Dude, save yourself," you know the end credits are rolling. But sometimes what feels like the worst possible ending is actually just clearing the stage for something infinitely better to begin. The new life upgrade. The transformation from relationship victim to life winner happens faster than you expect when you finally stop accepting scraps and start demanding the whole meal. Within a month of Operation House Sale, I went from someone whose biggest decision was choosing between chicken or fish for the wedding dinner to someone fielding job offers from companies I'd only dreamed about working for. The universe apparently rewards people who refuse to be backup plans by opening doors that were previously welded shut. The San Francisco job opportunity materialized like something out of a career fairy tale, complete with a salary bump that made my current position look like volunteer work. A company specializing in sustainable energy solutions had been tracking my project management work for months, and they reached out right when I needed a complete change of scenery. The timing was so perfect, it felt like someone upstairs was personally managing my career development while I was busy cleaning up my personal life. They offered stock options and the chance to work on projects that might actually make the world better instead of just making rich people richer. Starting over is simultaneously terrifying and exhilarating, like riding a roller coaster that you actually chose to get on instead of being strapped into by someone else's poor decisions. Every day brought new challenges that required actual problem-solving skills rather than the emotional detective work that had consumed my energy for months. Instead of trying to decode cryptic text messages and analyze suspicious phone behavior, I was learning new systems and coordinating with teams across multiple time zones. The mental stimulation of professional growth felt incredible after months of relationship stagnation. The complete life upgrade that came from refusing to be someone's backup plan exceeded every expectation I'd had about post-breakup recovery. Moving to San Francisco meant leaving behind every location that held memories of our relationship while embracing a city that represented pure possibility. The apartment I found had natural light that made my old place look like a cave, a kitchen that actually fit more than one person, and neighbors who didn't know anything about my romantic history or relationship failures. Zeus, the golden retriever I adopted from a local rescue, immediately proved himself a superior companion to my ex-fiancée in every measurable way. He never scrolled through his phone during conversations, never canceled plans to hang out with other dogs, and showed genuine enthusiasm for spending time together rather than treating our relationship like an obligation. His unconditional loyalty and straightforward communication style were refreshing after years of trying to decode human behavior that defied logical explanation. Life improvement accelerated at warp speed once I removed the toxic elements that had been poisoning my daily experience. Sleep quality improved dramatically when I wasn't lying awake analyzing weird conversations or suspicious behavior. Work performance increased when I could focus on actual projects instead of wondering what my partner was really doing during those mysterious phone calls. Social interactions became more enjoyable when I wasn't constantly worried about someone else's mood or hidden agenda affecting my plans. Career advancement opportunities multiplied once I had the mental bandwidth to pursue them properly. The energy I'd been wasting on relationship management suddenly became available for professional development, networking, and actually excelling at my job instead of just surviving each workday. My new colleagues noticed the difference immediately, commenting on my focus and enthusiasm for projects that would have felt overwhelming during the final months of my engagement. The financial benefits of eliminating relationship overhead costs were substantial enough to fund my entire cross-country relocation. No more splitting expensive dinners where one person spent the entire meal texting someone else. No more contributing to wedding expenses for an event that would never happen. No more buying gifts for someone who is already shopping for my replacement. The money saved from ending a relationship with someone who treated me like an option covered the security. Deposit on an apartment where I was clearly the priority. Zeus and I established routines that actually brought joy instead of obligation to our daily schedule. Morning walks through Golden Gate Park, weekend hikes in Marin County, and evenings where we could both relax without anyone checking their phone every 5 minutes. The simplicity of a relationship based on mutual respect and genuine affection felt revolutionary after years of navigating emotional minefields disguised as domestic partnership. All because I refused to be a backup plan. The professional success, the geographic fresh start, the loyal companion who actually wanted to spend time with me. None of it would have happened if I'd accepted Tessa's ridiculous proposal to wait on the sidelines while she explored her options. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you creates the exact conditions necessary for the best thing that could happen, like clearing undergrowth so healthier plants can finally grow. Tessa's betrayal forced me to reevaluate everything about my life, leading to changes I never would have made if she'd been a decent partner who respected our relationship. The whole experience taught me something crucial about how we choose to respond when people show us exactly who they are. Looking back, dodging the wrong marriage beats, enduring the right divorce every single time. The financial cost alone would have made my house sale look like pocket change, not to mention the emotional damage of realizing you married someone who never respected you in the first place. Don't let anyone treat you like a bench warmer. Play for the starting lineup in your own life. When someone shows you who they are through their actions, believe them immediately and respond accordingly. Tessa showed me she was someone who kept options open while planning our future together. I believed her and responded by giving her all the options she could handle, though some breaks really are one-way trips. Drop a comment about your funniest red flag story, or hit like if you've ever known someone in this situation. Trust me, we've all got stories.